back to another food preparation and nutrition video demonstration. Today we're actually doing one of my favourites, which is making fresh pizza dough. I make these all the time at home with my children. They absolutely love it, so hopefully you'll enjoy it just as much. So as always, at the start of the lesson there's a couple of things you need to do. So the first thing, we need to make sure our hands are nice and clean, so make your way to the sinks, give your hands a good wash. Secondly, you've got some equipment to collect today. So there's a few things you're going to need. You're going to need a measuring jug. Now these can be found in your plastic drawers down the centre, in the big drawer in the middle of your workstations. You're going to collect a metal bowl. That's going to be at the front on my desk here, on the teacher's desk. You'll need a palette knife. Now these can be found in the black units just to the side, just slightly off camera down here. So they're in the drawer just there. And lastly, you're going to need a metal baking tray. Now these baking trays will be found on my desk here alongside the non-stick parchment sheet. Whenever we use our baking trays, we always use the non-stick sheets as well. That just speeds things up when it comes to washing them. The last thing you need to do, and it's most important, is you're going to need to preheat your oven. So to do that, you'll notice on your ovens there are 3 dials. What you're going to want to do is make sure that the dial on the left is turned to the picture of the fan. That makes sure the oven's on. And the second thing you need to do is the temperature dial, which is the one on the right, is turned all the way around to number 200. You want to preheat your ovens to 200 degrees C. Once you've done that, you're ready to start. So let's go. So now we're ready to make them. First thing you're going to do is grab your metal bowl and you're going to add your flour. Now I've already added my flour into the bowl, which you can see there. So then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our butter. Now when we add our butter, we're going to use a technique called rubbing in. And essentially what you're going to do is, if I come inside this camera, I'll be able to see it better. You're going to take a little bit of butter, get it into the flour, and with my fingers, I'm just always going to do, like I said, rubbing. So I'm rubbing the butter and the flour between my fingers and sort of making a breadcrumby base. Now, you don't have to worry too much. It doesn't have to go like a short crust pastry. It doesn't have to go fully breadcrumb, just because obviously we're going to add hot water and that butter's going to break down with the hot water. It's just grabbing our butter, getting it in our fingers, and just rubbing it in like so. You can see the technique I'm doing. So I'm not making a mess. I'm not sort of swishing flour over. I'm just literally rubbing the butter and the flour between my fingers. And so hopefully on this camera next to me, you'll be able to see exactly what that looks like. So again, just rubbing this in. Now as part of your homework for this, you would have pre-weighed out all of your ingredients, so you should be able to do it just as quick as I can, because you won't have to weigh out your butter, you won't have to weigh out your flour. So hopefully you've done that preparation at home. Everything is pre-weighed out, almost like you're a television chef, and everything's there ready to go for you. More butter in, some more on your hand as well. I'm rubbing that in. So this does take a little bit of time, but it doesn't have to be neat, it's just literally rubbing that butter. You'll notice it will start to stick to your fingers. You can see my hands there. Just get that, rub your fingers. And you see, this is why we need to wash our hands as well. You're definitely going to be getting some messy fingers today. And now, last of my butter, get it in there, just break it up. There we go, speed that process up a little bit, and rub that in. There we are. So it doesn't need to be perfect, just give it a little mix. Just make sure it's all off our fingers. No point in being on our hand, left on our hands. And to make sure you scrape all of that butter and all that flour back into your bowl. There we go. So once that's in there, we're then going to add our sugar, our salt, and our yeast. Now the salt and the sugar, you don't have to provide that, we'll have that ready to go for you, so that's not going to be on your ingredients list, but just so you're aware, that is what you have to add in. So if you want to make this again at home, I'm putting some sugar and some salt in there, and I'll put the exact quantities up on the sway for you to see. And last but not least, I'm going to add my dried yeast. So all of that has gone in. Now I'm going to use my palette knife, and I'm going to use my palette knife just to give that a full mix. So I'm just going to give that a little stir, a little mix, just make sure that yeast goes right the way through the flour. What you don't want to have is having just a big sort of pile of yeast on the top. You want to make sure it runs right the way through that flour mixture. The salt and the sugar is just for the flavouring, it's not really much else. Just going to help that dough slightly. Okay, so it's not the end of the world if you don't put that in. The yeast is very important and that helps the dough rise. Don't put the yeast in, we're not going to have that nice rise and the nice pizza crust that we're going to want. Right, so now that has been mixed through, we're going to need to start adding our water and again mixing that to bring this sort of floury mixture you can see on the camera there. That floury mixture needs to then turn into a dough. And to do that we need to add some nice warm water, which you can obviously get from your sink. Now what's really important is firstly we do use warm water, but what's really important is we don't add all the water at the same time. So notice it will say on the method you're going to want 125 millilitres of warm water. What you don't want to do, the worst thing to do, is just dump all of that in the flour, into the flour mixture, because it's going to end up really sticky and really gloopy. You don't want a horrible sticky mess. You want to bring it together nice and slowly. So the way we do that, you can see on this camera here, I'm going to make what's called a weld. So I'm just going to move all the flour to the edge. So I make this nice sort of hole in the middle, like so. I'm just going to run my taps. I'm going to come off camera for a second. Very professional, I know. Get some hot water. I'm just going to run the tap so it gets nice and hot. And I want to get that to 125 millilitres. And you can see on here, that is literally going to be to here. So it's not much water at all. I'm not filling it all the way up. It's literally down here. There's a tiny amount of water. It's got to be precise, so I don't want to put too much in. So I always put it on a flat surface and I can look down and check. That's 100. So it's a tiny little bit more. Check again. That's perfect. That's 125. So that's the maximum amount of water you're going to want to put in. So that's nice and warm. So I'm going to put that into the middle. And again, I'm doing this probably in 3 or 4 stages. It's a tiny amount of water. That size of the other camera you can see. Get my palette knife. I'm just going to fold that mixture back over the water and give that a mix. Now when you first add the water, this is what happens, is we get a little bit impatient. It's going to look like for a while that nothing's happening. And when I add in this little bit of water, we're thinking, what is the point of doing what I'm doing? Nothing's actually working, nothing's happening. So we get impatient and then dump a load of water in, and then I get loads of hands up saying, sir, my dough's gone all, and the hands are all gloopy and full of this dough. So don't get impatient, add a little bit at a time. And again, once you've done that, you make another weld, so part it in the middle. Add another bit of water. So we're going to do this gradually, so I've still got loads of water left. And then folding action over the top. Mixing that in. Make sure I scrape the bottom. You can probably hear on the camera that scraping action is why I'm using a palette knife. You'll start to see on this camera now bits of that dough starting to form. There's still loads of loose flour, but we do have bits of dough starting to form. I'm going to get that in there. And again, I think that's what the water's gone. Add a little bit more. Fold that back in. So now I'm getting quite low on water, so I really do want to be careful. Now what I might start doing is getting rid of my palette knife and actually getting my hands in there now and trying to bring it together. So what I'm looking for is to try, if I sort of ball it up, you see here, it's starting to stick together. If I lift that up though, it's still very crumbly. So I know that's not enough water yet, so I'm just going to part that again. So it's getting there, so I've got this sticky bit here. So I'm going to try and get as much of that loose flour stuck to that mixture as possible. You can see I'm going to add, even though I've got only a tiny amount left, I'm only going to add a tiny amount of water. Do my very best. Now if you do go slightly too far with the water, you can always bring it back, but we're going to try and be as professional as I can be and get it done first time without going too far. I've said that now, I think we can all guess what's probably going to happen as I make this live on camera. Bring it together. You see again on this camera, it's starting to look more like a dough, but I've still got all of this that's not quite bonded to it yet. A little bit more water. Again, I'm still not using that whole amount of water. Getting it on there. So you scrape it all in, bring it all together. Together, nice. A little bit more. So then now, I'm literally, I'm almost trying to drip it on there. I'm not even pouring it now. I'm dripping the water on. So you can see, that's probably what, the fourth, fifth time I've added water. So I'm really trying to do this slowly. I'm not dumping that water. I've still got some water left in that measure. You might not be able to see that. Let's put it on that camera, you'll probably be able to see it. So I have still got some water left. I'm not going to get impatient. Okay, I'm just working through. But you can see each time I add a bit more water, I can now pick up that dough and not much is breaking away from it. There's a little bit there, but that's far less than what there was. So I'm just going to add the teeniest drop, probably onto my fingers actually rather than onto, let's get that rubbed on. There we go, and try and pick up the rest of that flour and the rest of that dough we've made. Lovely. Just again, scrape your fingers off. There's no point it all being on your hands. You want it as much of that dough to make the biggest pizza you can into your bowl. Here we are, like so. Okay, so that for me, I would say, is where I would want that dough. Okay, lovely. What I'm now going to do is I need to do something called kneading the dough. So I'm going to put my bowl to one side. I'm not going to work in my bowl anymore. I'm actually going to work, move that out of the way, directly on my table. Now, if I was to put my dough on the table now, that's just going to get stuck and I'm going to be peeling dough off my desk. It's not very nice. So at the front of the classroom, you're going to see some of these. These are called flour dredgers. And all I'm going to do, you'll be able to see on the cameras to the side, I'm just going to put a dusting. I know what you're thinking, right, we're going to make an absolute mess today. Yeah, I'm going to put a dusting of flour directly onto my table. Just going to give that a little mix around. There we go. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start kneading the dough. Now what that means is, I'm essentially going to press the dough and fold it. I'm going to keep pressing and folding. And that's known as kneading. So from there, I'm just going to press with my palm, fold it over and press. I'm going to keep folding and pressing, folding and pressing. And I'm using it on the desk, on the flour. And you can see I can pick that, because the flour's on the table, you can see that there on the side camera. I can pick that up and that's absolutely fine. And I'm just going to keep folding it over. Now we need to do this process of kneading for about 5 minutes. And that's going to help the dough take its shape when it's in the oven. Now notice what I'm doing, I'm literally just folding it and pressing it. I'm not banging it down, I'm not trying to hit it, anything like that. You're just going to damage your own dough. Okay, I know it sounds silly, how can you break it or damage it? But you're going to damage the structure of the dough that you've just spent all that time making. So it is literally just a fold over. I'll show you on this camera again. So it's fold over with your palm, so I'm folding it and then just squashing it down. You can use your second hand to squash that. Now you're going to want to do this for like 3 to 5 minutes. So this is going to be like a food lesson, and for some of you, a PE lesson as well, because the amount of students that tell me they're tired after making pizza dough is crazy. So just keep folding it over, and hopefully you'll notice it starts to be able to work. And this is going to, what this is doing, this is going to enable us to stretch out the dough. Now obviously you don't want to make a pizza that small, you want to be able to stretch that dough out. So that's why we are doing what we're doing now. We're folding it, and we're just going to try and break down those proteins. We're just going to keep squashing it. Now what I'll do, so this video is not too long, I'm going to do this about 5 minutes. We'll do a cut scene there, and you can join me when I've finished kneading. See you in a second. Okay, so I've been kneading my dough for around 5 minutes now, and I think it's probably ready to start shaping it into sort of a more pizza shape. Now, obviously when we roll ours out, the chances of it getting into a perfect circle, like you see if you order it from Domino's or so on, or whoever other companies, it's not going to happen. You're going to end up with sort of bits straggling off the end. Now, you could always cut it to shape and trim it if you really wanted to, but you don't need to do that. So to make our lives easier, what I've done is I've got a rolling pin out of our drawers that are by our sinks. I'm just going to put a bit of flour on the rolling pin. And just first of all, I'm going to press it down with my hands, just the palm, just try and get a shape equal. And then from the middle of the dough, I'm going to push down and roll it outwards. Okay, I'm going to turn it, and I'm always going to almost roll towards you. I'm rolling away from me towards the camera. You'll be able to see it on this Camera next to me. I'm just going to roll that out like so. Now I've still got flour on my desk, so it's not going to stick to my desk. So I'm just rolling it out, turning it from the middle and rolling outwards. And you should be able to see that from here, slowly starting to grow and get bigger. I'm just going to roll out, turn, and just keep rolling. Mine's not going to be too bad for shape. Roll out, turn. I'm going to keep repeating this until it's almost the size that will fit on my baking tray. I don't want a tiny weeny pizza, but at the same time I don't want a huge, great big thing. Now obviously the more you roll this out, the thinner it's going to be. So if you do enjoy a more thin crust pizza, then you're going to want to roll it out a lot more because you're going to want it to be thinner. If you enjoy a thicker pizza, your pizza is going to be smaller, but obviously you can leave it to be a little bit thicker. Now obviously remember, the thicker the dough, the longer it is going to take to cook. So these are going to want to go in the oven, once they're ready, for around 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how thick you make it. Now once you get to a point like me, I'm rolling it, it's not getting much bigger. Little tip, try and pick it up, flip it over to the other side, and then roll, do repeat on the other side. And turn and roll. So I'm just turning it into the shape I want my pizza to be. And it's start to grow nicely. And again, you can do the whole pick it up, flick it over. Now unfortunately, we're not quite like you see on the movies and on TV. We're not going to start picking it up and flinging it around our heads and doing all this sort of stuff. We're going to keep it quite firmly on the desk, and we're just going to use our rolling pins. Otherwise, I'm pretty certain that none of us will have any dough left, apart from all we've scooped up off the floor. Just get that in. Okay, that's quite a good size now. It's not actually a bad shape though. If I wanted to trim that a little bit, I could, but I'm quite happy leaving it like so. You can see. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to bring my baking tray in front of me, and I'm going to put this on to my baking tray. Just make sure it fits on, and make sure it's on your non-stick sheet as well, because you don't want it to stick. I'm now going to add the toppings. So to do that, first thing you're going to use is your passata. Now my passata's got basil leaves chopped in there. I love basil, so that's why I got this one. I think it adds to the flavour. If you just want straight tomato passata, that's fine. Now what I'm going to do, with a spoon, you can find a spoon in the black units, get a spoonful right in the middle and use the back of the spoon and just small circles getting bigger toward the outside. And again, I put it back in the middle and I just do spreading it around there. Now what I am going to do, I'm just going to leave about 1 centimetre from the edge, if I can, without any passata on it, because that's going to act as like my crust bit to grab hold of, rather than having the whole thing really full of sauce. Adding that spoon, so I'm trying not to drown it. You don't need to like pour loads of passata on so it goes really soggy. You want to make sure you get a nice even coat, a nice even spread. And again, I'm sure you'll be able to see from the camera next to me what I mean by that. Okay, so I'm spreading that on, putting it in the gaps, and it's not then still that circular motion with the back of the spoon, trying to keep, like I say, about 1 centimetre from the edge clear of any sauce. Once you get your passata on, my favourite is cheese, so I'm only going to make a cheese and tomato pizza, so I'm just going to get my cheese, and again I'm going to spread that cheese, trying to avoid that crust, if you like, that I've just made. So just get a nice even coating of cheese. Now if you want to add any other toppings to your pizza, that is absolutely fine. You can bring whatever you want to put on your pizza. But what I will say is everything that you bring in must be pre-chopped and ready to go. You're not going to have time, for example, if you love peppers on your pizza, you're not going to have time to bring a whole pepper in and start slicing that up. So if you want to bring anything in extra to add on your pizza, by all means please do. That would be great to see what creations you actually make in class, but it must all be pre-chopped at home. If you obviously want pepperoni on it, then that's fine. They normally come pre-sliced. You just get out the packet and put it on. But if you want things like peppers, pineapple, make sure it's all pre-chopped and ready to go straight onto your pizza, because we're not going to have time to cut it in the lesson. Right, now you've done that, mine's nice and thin, so they want to go in the oven for around 15 to 20 minutes. Again, that depends on how thick it is. So we are going to have to keep an eye on it. So we would have talked about in previous about testing that if it's ready. This is all about visual. We're going to be looking through the oven to see how it's looking. If it's starting to look, cooked, then we'll take it out of the oven and hopefully it will be. So it's testing for readiness. What I would say though is we don't want to open our oven to have a look inside because all the heat's going to come out of the oven. If it's not ready, we're going to close the oven again. It's going to take longer for that oven to reheat back up. So once it goes in the oven, we don't open the door until we want to take it out. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to put this in the oven, as I say, for about 15 minutes and we'll rejoin back to see what my finished pizza looks like. See you in a minute. Right, welcome back. Now obviously whilst your pizzas are in the oven, you were busy washing up, tidying up, washing your desks, making sure your sinks are nice and clean, etc, etc. One thing we will say is whenever we do any washing up, we want to make sure that any excess food that we have, so for example, some of you might have had some excess dough in your bowls, make sure that goes into the bins first because we don't want to put food and things down our sink. It's going to clog the sinks up and it's not going to be very nice for us to have to then start cleaning it up. We're going to make us late for next lesson, late for lunch, late home, etc. So any spare food you have, including the flour that you had on your desk, you can get that into your hand and then get it into the bins. Right, my pizza's been in now for just over the 15 minutes and it is looking good, it's looking cooked. So we're going to need to get that out of the oven. So to do that, you're going to need to get yourself some oven gloves, and I would have come around, or a teacher would have come around and handed those out to you. We don't want to be touching anything in the oven without our oven gloves on. You notice that I've got heat mats. Now you don't need these. The only reason I have heat mats is because when I bring the stuff out of the oven, I'm going to put it here so the camera can see. Whenever you guys take something out of the oven, you can just put it straight on top of your hob, whether that be a gas hob or the electric hob, it doesn't matter. What's really important is nothing hot touches our nice new surfaces because it will burn and mark them, which is why I use the heat mats, which is why you get stuff and put it straight on top of the hob. Okay, when you get it out, you're going to need to obviously, once it's cooked, you're going to probably want to need to cut that up to fit it into your Tupperware box. Now when you bring a box to school, make sure it's a suitable container. It's going to be able to hold a whole pizza. Don't just bring little boxes like this because you're not going to be able to put a whole pizza or fit a whole pizza into that box. So try and bring a nice big Tupperware box for you to take that home in. If you need to cut it up, rather than using a knife, just get some scissors from your sink drawer and just cut them up, and obviously you'll need to wash that knife afterwards. So let's get it out of the oven then. Let's get my oven gloves on. Open my door. Oh, that is nice and hot. Ah, looking good. Place that onto my heat mat, so I'll do that so you can see. And there we have it. That is a nicely cooked pizza. I say I quite like the thin crust pizza, hence why I rolled mine out quite big. If you wanted yours a little bit thicker, just don't roll it out so much and keep it that little bit thicker, but as you know, it will probably take a little bit longer to cook. As I say, I've only done cheese and tomato. You can bring whatever toppings you want to put onto your pizza. You just need to make sure that they are ready to go. They're pre-chopped up, or it's just stuff that you can quickly take out of a packet and put it on the pizza, because you're not going to have that long to start decorating. It should just be grab it, chuck it on, get it in the oven. Okay, so if you want peppers or anything like that, make sure it's all pre-chopped at home. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, we look forward to seeing your creations in class. See you soon.